Hey, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar on how Brexit will affect your regulatory position and obligations. We have listeners from across Europe, which, as we speak, still includes the UK, and from North America. So firstly, your speakers today. My name is Wyness. I'm the Commercial Director at TSG Consulting in Europe, and I'm here to introduce the webinar and to facilitate the Q&A sessions, and I'll talk about those in a minute. My colleague, Dr. Stephen Brennan, will deliver the presentation. Stephen's a Senior Regulatory Manager at TSG Consulting, and part of Stephen's progress to becoming a Senior Consultant after his PhD at Queen's University Belfast was in the aerospace industry, managing chemical substitution programs both in-house and as part of industry trade associations. His work was complementary to his involvement in REACH authorization applications, which were critical in keeping manufacturing capability in the European Economic Area. As many of you will know, Brexit is a fast-moving and in some instances appears to be a rather Byzantine, or you could even say Machiavellian process. But our aim today is to drill down to the chemical regulatory aspects which might happen and might well affect you and your organization. We can't promise that will be as exciting as some of the recent political maneuvering. However, the changing regulatory environment is important to your business, and as a community of professionals in the regulatory world, we should all benefit from sharing knowledge and experience. The webinar today will take about 45 minutes, and there are two sections to the presentation, each followed by its own Q&A session. So we have two Q&A sessions. The first session will focus on understanding and maintaining compliance with EU REACH in the event of Brexit, and the second session will focus more on the UK REACH and how to comply. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible in the time available. However, some of the more detailed and specific questions we may not be able to answer today, and we do apologise, but time is limited. Following the webinar, we'll be sending to each listener a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slides. So before I start, I'd like to indulge you all with 3 slides on TSG Consulting. In brief, we're a regulatory consultancy and part of the Science Group PLC. Our areas of interest in the chemical industry are mostly industrial and specialty chemicals, agrochemicals, biocides and cosmetics. As you would expect, our staff includes project managers, regulatory managers and scientific specialists, as listed on that slide. It's important in the context of this presentation particularly and the topic that you know we have offices which are legal entities with regulatory professionals across Europe, specifically in Spain, Germany and France, as well as the UK. So we believe we're well positioned to help and support those companies in the event of any form of Brexit. We also have offices in the USA, where we undertake both federal and state regulatory activities, and we have an office in Canada. So without much further ado, I'm delighted to pass to my colleague Stephen, and I will talk with you all again at the first of the 2 Q&A sessions after the first phase of the presentations. Thank you very much. Stephen.
Position that the UK is in and how it got to this position. Then we will discuss what happens to EU REACH in the UK under the proposed deal. Then we will discuss what happens to EU REACH in the UK if there is no deal. Then we will review how to maintain compliance with EU REACH in the event of a no deal. And then we will have a question and answer session on EU REACH. After that, we will have an introduction to UK REACH. And then after that, we will finish with a Q&A session specific to UK REACH and any other Brexit questions that you might have. Okay, so the current state of play. Well, this story begins probably quite a while ago, but I think that the focus on Brexit began prior to the referendum, which is held by the UK in June 2016. On that referendum, the UK population voted in a majority to leave the European Union, And on the 29th of March 2017, the UK Parliament triggered Article 50. So Article 50 is a clause or is an article within European regulation that allows a current member state to leave the Union. It is a 2-year process, and it really does not give a lot of time to negotiate a deal. So these things and instruments are quite complex, but since the Article 50 has been triggered, the UK and the EU have been negotiating for an orderly withdrawal for the UK from the Union. In November of last year, the UK and EU negotiators had agreed on a 585-page document. This document has faced a lot of scrutiny in the UK by the media, the politicians and the general public. And on the 15th of January, the UK Parliament voted not to accept that agreement. So as it currently stands, the UK will leave the EU on 29th of March 2019 if nothing further is agreed. This is a quickly moving topic. On an almost daily basis, we were receiving reports and news items related to Brexit, and a lot of times as well, things are changing within the UK Parliament. So as it currently stands as well, there will be a vote on the 29th of January where the UK Parliament may vote on the 585-page document or that particular document with some concessions. However, nothing is guaranteed. All the information that we present in these slides was obtained from the UK and EU institutions, particularly those related to REACH. So that would be the European Chemicals Agency, the UK government website, and also the UK Health and Safety Executive. Just want to point out as well that whenever we talk about REACH here, we talk about both EU REACH and the proposed UK REACH. Whenever we're talking about a specific regulation, we will say either EU REACH or UK REACH. Also just want to point out as well that whenever we talk about the applicability of EU REACH, this currently includes the 28 member states of the European Union, plus Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway. And whenever we talk about the EU 27, we mean the current European Union member states, excluding the UK. So these negotiations about the future agreement has been negotiated between the UK and the EU 27. Okay. So what happens to EU REACH under the proposed deal? Well, the short answer to that one is that everything stays the same for a couple of years or possibly longer. The 585-page agreement would mean that the EU and the UK will enter into a transition period, and this would last to 31st of December 2020. However, it is possible for this to be extended. During this period, the UK will continue to comply with EU rules, including EU REACH. However, the UK would not participate in EU institutions, and they would effectively have no say over policies. So this means that the UK Health and Safety Executive would not have a say in ACA's decisions. So during this transition period, the EU and the UK will continue their negotiations in order to agree a future relationship after the transition period is over. This is a relatively unknown aspect because a lot of the news items and debate within the UK leads us to believe that the UK people think that the 585-page deal was the final agreement. Really, this agreement, or this 585-page document, only buys time in order to agree on a final way of working. So on that, the EU and the UK released a political declaration which gives us some insight into the content of the future negotiations should the agreement be accepted. During that transition period, the UK would seek associate membership of some EU institutions, including the European Chemicals Agency. And if all conditions were met and enough compromises were made, the UK would continue to comply with EU REACH even when it had left the EU. So effectively, what is being aimed for with this political declaration is that the UK would continue to comply with EU REACH, but not be part of the European Union. However, there needs to be an agreement in place before that is possible. So what happens to EU REACH if there is no deal? Companies operating from the UK will need to take action in order to maintain access to the EU and UK markets. Now that's specifically to their REACH compliance needs. Additionally, some companies from outside the European Union may have appointed a UK company as their EU REACH only representative, and they may need to change from that only representative to an EU legal entity. Some companies may also be affected if their UK supplier does not or cannot maintain their EU REACH registrations. So for example, if there's a company from Spain at the moment which sources a REACH compliant supply of chemicals from the UK, they may need to become a REACH registrant themselves. UK actors in EU REACH regulations can no longer directly participate in EU REACH. So UK manufacturers, formulators and producers of articles that need access to the EU market will need to appoint an only representative to act on their behalf. After the UK leaves the EU, the REACH regulation will be brought into UK law by the European Union Withdrawal Act of 2018, which will mean that a UK REACH is born. And some companies wishing to access the UK market will need to comply with the UK REACH regulation. However, we'll discuss this in more detail later. So next, we just want to discuss what the options may be in order for UK companies or other companies affected that may have a UK supply chain or have appointed a UK-only representative, what actions they need to take in order to maintain EU REACH compliance. So I'm just going to talk through each of the four options that are presented here individually. So option number one, appoint an only representative in the European Union. So non-EU companies that have appointed a UK-based only representative can today transfer to an EU27 only representative under the existing system. Currently, UK companies cannot appoint an only representative under REACH. AGA stated that manufacturers and formulators will be able to transfer their EU REACH registrations, authorizations and other notifications to an EU27 entity before 29th of March. So that's specifically for UK companies. This process will be clarified at some point in January 2019 according to AGA's guidance. It is important to note that UK-based importers cannot appoint an only representative to undertake their EU REACH obligations. I will talk a little bit more about that in a later slide. And of course, as per REACH Article 8, an only representative must have sufficient knowledge and experience in managing substances and the information related to them in order to be a legally compliant OR. The TSG team, including our latest recruit from the European Chemicals Agency, has the experience to advise and assist you in this process should you need it. So option number 2 for continued compliance. So a company that is currently, a UK company that is currently holding EU REACH registrations can move those EU REACH registrations to an EU entity. Doing so means that related operations such as importing needs to also be transferred to that office. Also, the office needs to be capable of receiving regulators for inspection, much like the requirements laid out in Article 8 of REACH for only representatives. So as an example, a UK manufacturer may have offices in many different parts of the world. And it just might happen that they're holding a UK or using their UK office to make EU REACH registrations. And they may, in order to mitigate that risk, what they could do is transfer from their UK office those REACH registrations to potentially another EU 27 office. The only caveat to that is, again, that office needs to be capable of receiving regulators for an inspection, much like the requirements for an OR. Option number 3. So, sourcing the chemical from an EU-based company might be another way to manage your EU REACH obligations. So you can take advantage of the re-import exemption and negate the need for having an EU REACH registration by sourcing your supply from the EU. For example, if your company currently sources a chemical from the UK and is based in Spain, you can also look to seek an alternative source of that particular chemical within the EU 27. It is likely that that other source of the chemical is registered under REACH. Finally, on to option number 4. It's for EU customers or EU companies to undertake their own EU REACH obligations. So it may not be possible for some companies to appoint an only representative under EU REACH, and those REACH obligations can be moved on to their customers based in the EU. So an example of this would be a company that's based in the UK and imports chemicals from Russia, but exports those chemicals again to Belgium. So this UK company is purely an importer, doesn't do anything with the chemicals, and then subsequently exports those chemicals to customers in Belgium. So that UK company at the moment probably holds an EU REACH registration if they meet the requirements. But in the future, the EU REACH obligations will probably pass to the Belgian company. So the UK company will have to rescind their EU REACH obligations. So that concludes the first part of our webinar, which is about maintaining compliance within EU REACH in a no-deal scenario. And I'll pass you back to Lewis.
Thanks, Stephen. So we're going to have some questions on that first section of the presentation. And I've got 2 questions from our listeners. So obviously I'm not going to say who the listener is or their affiliation. First question, and just to let you know, Stephen hasn't had much sight of these questions, so let's test his expertise. So Stephen, the first question, would an EU legal entity have to have their technical expert in the EU, or can the work actually be done in the UK?
This is an interesting question. I'll refer again to REACH Article 8, which stipulates the requirements for only representatives acting in REACH. And I will say that if you go to that article, you will get probably a more detailed answer than I can give you today. It would, in my mind, it would be that you need to have REACH expertise at the EU 27 office and capable of receiving, regulators. However, some of that work for that particular only representative specialist could be carried out within the UK office as well. However, need to maintain the expertise at the EU27 office.
Thank you. Second question, and I quote, "We are an importer in the UK and not a manufacturer. I assume we will have to set up a new legal entity in the EU and not an OR."
Yes, that is indeed correct. If you're purely an importer and you do not import and then use the chemicals to make further formulations, i.e. not a manufacturer or a formulator, then you will, if you want to maintain EU REACH registrations, you will need to set up a legal entity in the EU27. And that legal entity must be responsible for carrying out related regulatory obligations, particularly those obligations related to importing.
Okay, thank you. One last question. It looks, well, this is argumentative, but it looks like a no-deal Brexit at the moment. Nobody knows, of course. Do you think there will be a possibility for the UK to stay in ECHA as an associated member?
Yes, this is quite interesting. Of course, the deal, or the 585-page document known as the deal, stipulates that the UK would maintain access to ECHA, and the political declaration that came with that document showed that the UK government were open for, and the EU institutions were open for the UK to be an associated member of ECHA. That is possible, but only in a deal scenario. Because if a no deal was to happen, there would be no agreement for that to take place. And we also know that if a no deal was to happen, there may be smaller deals on some other regulatory obligations, such things that would impact on aerospace and keeping airplanes in the sky and movement of goods into the UK from the EU. Those deals would only probably be for essential services for a short period of time. So in a no-deal Brexit, I do not think it is possible for the UK to stay an associate member of ECHA.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Right, we have to now move on to the UK REACH part of the presentation. I pass back to Stephen.
Thanks, Lewis. So in the event of a no-deal Brexit, UK REACH will be made UK law by the European Union Withdrawal Act of 2018. The Act replicates EU REACH with minor modifications to make it applicable to UK law. And we can assume that all obligations that exist for EU REACH would also apply in UK REACH. The Act will appoint the UK Health and Safety Executive as the UK REACH Authority, and they will be supported by a new IT system called UK REACH IT. And TSG has already viewed another early version of this system in order to be ready for its possible deployment. Now, something to consider with UK REACH is that a company's role in UK REACH might be very different to that currently exists in EU REACH. And companies need to take considerable effort to identify what these changes might mean, because it will affect the actions that they need to take. So an example is a UK company today that would purchase chemicals from Spain. So one would assume that if the registration requirements were met, that Spanish company would hold an EU REACH registration, and the UK company would be viewed as a downstream user, so they wouldn't have to hold a registration because they're effectively using the Spanish company's registration. However, in the event of a no-deal Brexit, the UK company moves from a downstream user to become an importer into the UK. So under the UK REACH system, they would be possibly liable for a REACH registration or a UK REACH registration and any other obligations that are related to that. So one key element that is different in UK REACH that is different than EU REACH is that it allows for grandfathering of EU REACH registrations, authorisations, PPORDs, and other notifications into UK REACH. This is effectively duplicating the EU REACH notifications in the UK system, and it should save effort for UK REACH actors. However, the grandfathering system itself has been reported to be quite laborious in the fact that it would be on a substance-by-substance basis, but that might be subject to change. So UK REACH requires non-UK manufacturers, formulators and producers to appoint a UK-based only representative. So much like in EU REACH, this only representative is required in order to fill UK REACH obligations on their behalf and allows access to the UK market. So for UK REACH, the draft statutory instrument that transforms EU REACH into UK REACH will go to UK Parliament for discussion and possible approval sometime in February. So there is quite a lot to happen before that becomes law. And by the way, that instrument is available for viewing on the gov.uk website. So UK REACH also has a phased approach, similar, well not similar, but EU REACH had a phased approach, but for different reasons. So after 29th of March, companies wishing to grandfather EU REACH registrations, authorisations and notifications into UK REACH will have 60 days to open a UK REACH IT account. Then they will have to submit a notification before the 60 days is up. Companies that do not have an existing EU REACH registration will have 180 days from 29th of March in order to notify the UK HSE of their intent to submit a REACH registration. Registration notifications in the first instance will have a lesser data requirement than EU REACH registration. Effectively, you'll just need to provide some company information, any information related to an existing EU REACH registration, and submit that to the UK HSE. Also, the UK HSE has started to share some details of what that might mean, and they've created and recently published a guidance document for that. So another contentious topic is that the UK expects that registrants will submit the remaining data 2 years from 29th of March 2019. So companies with existing data rights will need to confirm that their current letter of access or data sharing agreements allows them to use that data for UK REACH registration. In addition, new UK REACH registrations may also want to benefit from that data rather than generate their own. So they will have to negotiate and pay for access to that data. And TSG can help you identify who those data owners might be and help you negotiate access to support your EU and UK REACH registrations. And just before we go on to the next slide, I did mention the UK HSE, or the UK Health and Safety Executive, have provided some guidance. The example that we used here has been mainly around REACH registrations. However, the guidance does touch on PPORDs, notifications, also on authorizations and restrictions. So it is worthwhile, if you're concerned about what UK REACH requirements might be, to look at the UK HSE website and find the guidance. Just as a simple case study of grandfathering, we're just going to talk through what a UK company might need to do. So if you hold an EU REACH registration and you are a UK manufacturer, formulator, or importer, and you might be a sole, joint, or lead registrant, or you might be a non-EU or EEA manufacturer or formulator, and you have appointed a UK-only representative. You can take advantage of the grandfathering system to effectively transfer your EU REACH registration into UK REACH. Now, one of the requirements of this is that the EU REACH registration should be valid. So you'll need an EU REACH registration number in order to carry out this process. And in order to do that, what you would do on just after 29th of March, you would open a UK REACH IT account. You would enter the basic information in UK REACH IT by 29th of May. Then after that, you would probably need to create an IUCLID dossier or obtain your IUCLID dossier from your EU REACH IT, modify it, and then upload that IUCLID dossier on UK REACH IT by 29th of March 2021. So that's just one example of the actions you might need to take in the event of a no-deal Brexit and you want to comply with the new UK REACH regulation. So the key takeaways from this presentation. So Brexit is a very fast-moving topic, bringing a lot of uncertainty. Negotiations seem to be continuing at some level, and the details of this may change. In the event of a no-deal Brexit, which is the default position if nothing is agreed by the EU27 and the UK, EU REACH will be replaced by UK REACH, and actors in the UK market will need to comply with UK REACH. I think the most important takeaway from today is that you need to take action to understand what this means to your company in the event of a no-deal Brexit. There are actions that can be taken now to mitigate risk, and also you need to work to a very strict deadline if you want to maintain compliance within UK law. Again, some of these details may change, so it is worthwhile keeping an eye to the guidance that's published through official channels. So before we go into the final Q&A session, we just want to discuss a little bit about TSG's Brexit package. So we are offering 6 months of a helpline, which gives you up to 20 hours of regulatory support on Brexit and other regulatory topics. And we will also give email alerts. We'll tell you what you need to know when you need to know it. You know, for example, if the UK HSE or the UK government or DAFRA were to issue further guidance, we would let you know as soon as that becomes available. We will also hold exclusive webinars so that we can meet again before 29th of March and see how things have developed to get you ready for Brexit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So now we will try and answer some of your questions that you have posed throughout the webinar. So I'll go straight into those, Stephen. Some of those you may have answered in your presentation, but it's more for clarification than anything else. So first question, sorry, 2 questions. Can an LOA, so letter of access, from EU REACH be used for UK REACH registration purposes?
Okay. This all depends. A letter of access, if you buy into and if you agree to a letter of access, you will be working to the terms that are specified in that letter of access. So you'll need to review your data rights for every letter of access that you currently hold. It may stipulate EU REACH, and you may want to seek further clarification from the data owner, but you need to review every LOA on a case-by-case basis. The other thing to consider, well, something that's interesting which we've heard about is that some data owners may want to allow UK REACH registrants to use the existing data for no additional charge. Now, I have heard that some companies are making this as a proposal, but again, it will be on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Now, two questions on a more sort of practical, technical level about the IUCLID. First question is for UK REACH. Does it use the same IUCLID 6 format as currently used in Europe, or will it be starting from scratch, i.e. a new system?
The guidance that's been issued states that it will be using the IUCLID 6 format, or the existing format, which is IUCLID 6, and that is maintained by the European Chemicals Agency, and UK REACH will use that.
And linked to that, another question came in, says, asking you to explain a bit more about what you mean by modifying the dossier in IUCLID for UK REACH, so the existing EUCLID.
There may be some minor changes, such as tonnage information. Of course, well, a few different things that will change, and this list is non-exhaustive. In UK REACH at the moment, or EU REACH at the moment, you might be a different actor that you might be in UK REACH. So you might be a manufacturer, you might be a formulator, you might be an importer, you might be an only representative. So that's one field that will need to change in IUCLID 6. Your tonnage information in Section 3 will probably need to change as well. You'll need to identify specific tonnages to the chemicals that you place on the UK market, not on an EU-wide market. So you'll need to review your supply chain and your purchase information, your customer information in order to identify that as well. So that's just an example of a few things that might change, and they are minor modifications. I just want to say as well that the UK HSE has stated that the existing data requirements in EU REACH will be carried across into UK REACH in a no-deal Brexit. So you could assume that all the endpoints and data requirements that you have for EU REACH would also apply for UK REACH as well.
Okay, thank you. One final system on the question on the UK IT system is: do you know when the UK IT system will be available?
I'm not sure. I think the plan is to have it ready for 29th of March. The guidance says that it will be ready for 29th of March, but that's as far as I can tell.
Okay. Question came in: will the 1 ton REACH registration obligations, I assume, apply if there's a no deal for UK REACH?
Yes. So all the existing EU REACH registration data requirements will be transferred into UK REACH. So there will be the tonnage bands and their association with the data requirements and the amount of testing required.
Okay, thank you. A listener writing in said it's his or her understanding that in the case of a no deal from the 29th of March this year, we'll have 60 days to submit basic information and 2 years to submit the full dossier to the UK authority. What is the basic information to be submitted in that 60-day period?
Okay. So I do have some information on that. So that a company that wishes to grandfather initially needs to supply evidence of their ACCA registration. And as far as I can tell from the guidance, this needs to be a valid registration, i.e. it can't already have been transferred to another legal entity. They also need to supply their company identity, the substance identity, and information on the manufacture and use of the substance data. They also need to provide any notifications of an ACCA decision which relates to that particular registration. So this, I think you had a second part to your question. Okay, no, it's around the 2 years to submit the full dossier. No, that's, as far as I can tell, that's all that's required.
Yeah, it was just the first 60-day question.
I would refer to the UK HSE guidance for the full requirements.
Okay, and I think probably one last question, looking at the list, we will take, as there will be no pre-CIFs under UK REACH, how will potential registrants find each other to ensure one substance, one dossier, if that indeed is the system for UK REACH?
That's an interesting question. UK REACH IT, as far as we can tell, will allow companies to grandfather. Effectively, they're making a notification to the UK HSE. And whenever they make a notification, the companies that have made a notification, their data or contact details will be shared. So much like in EU REACH, you have CIFs. I think that it won't be as organised as that, but you will at least see who the other companies are that are intending to make a registration for that particular substance.
That's great. Thank you very much, Stephen. Well, before I close, just a quick reminder to all the listeners of our TSG's Brexit package. There's contact information there. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for bearing with us and listening this afternoon, and to Stephen for his presentation. Thank you very much, and goodbye.